Hi, everyone. Hello, hello, hello. Let's see if I'm in the right place. Hi, Lisa. Oh, I need to invite everyone, Amy, into the room. Oh, good, you're here. Hi, Lisa. Glad you could make it. Oh my goodness, I am still learning about this. Oh, Pamela, good that you're here. So it looks like this is a new feature. I can't hear you, so you might be muted. Yeah, you are. So Amy, we definitely need to talk about this because well, Amy's not on yet. So everyone, this is our new format and I'm getting the hang of it. It may be a new security feature where they're asking us to manually allow every single participant into the room, in which case we might have to go back to the other one. But hi, we have a few people here so far. Now, you don't need to put your video on, but you're most welcome to. And that's one of the reasons we went to the meeting format. Let me just see if I can modify this a little bit. How's everybody doing?
Great. Hi, everybody.
Where are you guys from?
I'm in Connecticut.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think you might have put in a request, right? A question?
I did. Where do I write it, Susan?
We don't pre-submit them, so it's
okay.
Mostly for, but I did make a note of it in case you couldn't make it today, but you can ask it once we all get ourselves online, so.
Thank you. And I'm sure you're addressing it anyway. I just wanted to put it down for myself too.
No, I think it's great.
Who knows?
We want questions.
Thank you.
Where are you, Lisa?
I'm from Dallas, Texas.
Texas, okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Glad that you're here. I'm fooling around with a new light. I don't know if it makes any difference. There's Amy. So Amy, I'm going to make you a co-host. And hi, Katie. Katie's here. Hi, Katie.
Oh, there she is.
But it doesn't look like she's hearing me. Katie? Hello, Katie. Katie. Amy, I'm going to make you a co-host so you can help with, it looks like we're having to manually admit every single attendee, which right now is pretty light, but at times we've had, over 200. So not sure that that's a realistic effort. So, so Katie, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fine. Thank you so much for being here and joining us. I'm getting the ropes here of this meeting system. Normally what we do is, where are you? Normally what we do is a webinar, but we had so much fun in one of the sessions where we let people kind of see one another. So we're going to take a vote at the end because for those of you who don't want to see all the faces, just put at the very top, you'll see speaker view. So now we're seeing Katie. And Katie, you look very well put together as opposed to me.
This is as good as it gets in quarantine.
Exactly. And underneath, she's wearing her pajamas.
Yeah.
So Katie, thank you again. And I'd love for you to introduce yourself to everyone who's here, let them know a little bit about you and your wonderful work. I was so happy that we got to do a podcast together around the time of the launch of your most recent book on adolescence and depression. And it's a powerful, powerful book. So let's let people know, because we have parents whose kids are young and parents of teens and even college age kids in the group. And then Amy, do me a favor and tell me if you're able to let me off the hook from admitting people as they show up, because I'd like to just concentrate. Now, for all of you who are doing the video, you're admitting them. Okay. You can turn your video off, you can leave it on, but if you're getting a little distracted by all the faces, go ahead and look at the top right of your screen and you'll see something that says speaker view. And that will mean that whichever one of us is speaking, although for some reason I'm speaking and I'm still seeing just Katie. But are you guys seeing me when I talk?
Yes.
You can scroll. You can
Yes.
scroll and pick who you want to
Yeah,
see with your
that's true.
finger. So
Thank you. Okay. But otherwise, whoever is speaking, we'll
Oh, I don't
see.
want that.
Katie, say a little something and let's test that.
Hi.
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
lit up now.
So,
You all-
so great. I don't have to admit people. And just so that you know, again, because I mentioned this when we first started, we can, you're all muted, but there will come a point when we'll unmute everyone to say hi. And then if you want to stick around at the end, we have this great feature on meetings, which is why we moved to this format, where you can just get together with other parents for a few minutes and say, how you doing? Or you can meet people that way. So Katya, I'm going to mute you. And Katie, start by introducing yourself, and then I know we already have one question, and we'll kind of open it up to whatever questions you all have of either or both of us.
Hi guys. So I am a child and adolescent psychotherapist by day and writer by night. I have been working with kids ages 4 to 18 for 22 plus years, I think now. I started out working in a school for kids with learning differences. And so I kind of have specialized in learning differences and anxiety disorders over the years. And right now I predominantly have a lot of tween and teen. Muted me.
Sorry.
You can't keep muting me, Susan.
Yeah, well, we do a mute all as people are coming in, so we'll keep an eye on that. Thanks.
And so as Susan said, I've written a few books. My first one was called The Happy Kid Handbook, How to Raise Joyful Children in a Stressful World. And that was aimed more at preschool, elementary school age kids, and kind of addressing some of the stress that they deal with and that parents deal with, because it's hard to be a parent right now. So there's lots of different activities in there and just different information for parents to help with all kinds of things. Some of it stress and anxiety, some of it just, building empathy and dealing with social issues and all that kind of stuff. And I followed that up with No More Mean Girls, The Secret to Raising Confident, Compassionate Girls. And then after that, I wrote the Depression Workbook for Teens, which is a very skills-based book for teenagers who are dealing with not just depression, but low self-esteem, some anxiety. So it's largely based in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is what I do in my practice when I'm seeing my kids every day. And so I just giving them a lot of skills to learn how to deal with their self-esteem issues, depressive symptoms, anxiety symptoms, so that, because, one thing I have found over the years is not every kid who struggles with symptoms of anxiety or depression necessarily needs therapy every single week, but every kid does need coping skills. So my books do tend to be pretty action-packed in terms of trying to give parents as many resources as possible to use, so that you're not running for a therapist every single time an obstacle comes up, because they're going to come up.
That's great. Okay. Thank you. And let me just mention a couple of things. If you only want to see the face of the person talking, choose speaker view up in the top right rather than gallery view. And that'll vary by device, but it's usually in the upper right-hand corner. And we're gonna mute you guys, but if you have a question, just unmute yourself, and that's the little microphone looking icon with a red line running through it. So Pam, do you want to ask your question, or should I read the one that you wrote in?
You can read it. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. So the question, this is our question from Pam. Please address the extraordinary pressure homeschooling presents at this time in terms of expectations of our kids' performance, completing assignments, staying on task, all within an emotionally charged and changing home atmosphere. So I'll bet a lot of you have that question.
Right. You're talking about not traditional homeschooling, but now my kids are at home and I'm a teacher and I never meant to be schooling. Okay. Which is a huge stressor for all of us right now. And one thing I keep saying is even the homeschoolers are struggling because they're not used to being trapped at home. And that's not how homeschooling works anyway. We're kind of calling it, some people are calling it this homeschooling, some people are calling it distance learning. I'm calling it crisis learning at home. And why am I running a Zoom school while I'm doing everything else and trying to work? So I think one thing that I was just talking about with another group on another Zoom call just 5 minutes ago was this expectation gap that we're all struggling with right now. It's difficult because depending on how your school is handling it, a lot of schools are like dumping 40 assignments on the kids on Monday mornings and saying, okay, everything's due Friday and you can have a Zoom meeting once a day. Other schools are logging into Zoom all day long. My own kids have to log into Zoom for their instruction all morning. Then they have to do all the assignments in the afternoon. And the Zooming is a brain drain. And then the assignments on top of it, which I'm apparently supposed to be tracking while I'm working, it's all these different stressors. So I have been just telling parents to really maintain as much contact as possible with the schools. They're not going to do every assignment. They're not going to perform the way that they perform at school because they're not at school. They're being taught remotely. In some cases, they're teaching themselves. It's very difficult to teach yourself something like math. History, you can arguably read a book and learn something from it, but there are some classes, math and science, that are very difficult to self-teach. And we're not, people who are not homeschool teachers are not necessarily equipped to take the reins of teachers. So, maintaining contact with the school via email, if possible, or whatever way they're talking to parents, to just say, what are the realistic expectations? What absolutely has to be done? And then giving the kids a little bit of leeway, a little bit of grace through this. Their whole lives, like ours, have been upended. It's not going to be the same. The grades are not going to be the same. My suspicion is most schools are just going to move them up. In LA, a lot of schools are switching to pass-fail gradually as they realize they're not going back. So, that's not to say don't do the work, but, the standard is not really that kids need to be working for 6.5 hours straight from home. For elementary school students, they're saying, an hour to an hour and a half is max. And for middle school students, a couple of hours. And, high school students, even about the same. And, kind of hyper focusing on those certain subject areas. So, I pulled my own kid out of music class every week because he plays the piano at home. And I said, this is one last Zoom. That's way too much. We're just not going to do that. And they were okay with that. They said, that's fine, So I think we need to be speaking up for the kids as much as possible.
Great. So I'll add in my 2 cents or my 4 cents or a cent and a half. I am also a credentialed teacher and I homeschooled my son, so I have a different vantage point. I love what you said, Katie, because you're in it. You've got kids and so you're really up to date and current with what's happening in the real world right now. And my opinion is, I love what you said in terms of the time. And I think that can be really helpful to start to imagine that we're condensing the 6-hour day. It doesn't need to be 6 hours. And what I've said in lots of the programs I've been doing, podcasts, and I did a whole class on homeschooling and isolation, a master class. Having homeschooled my son, I realized pretty quickly that what kids do in a 6-hour block of time is there's so much filler.
Yeah.
Johnny, sit down. I told you to sit down. Stop touching that. No, you can't go to the bathroom. I thought you just went to the bathroom. Let's go here now, line up. No, getting back, there's so much. So if you were to condense it down to the actual teaching and the actual learning, when kids are actually paying attention and engaged, we're talking about by far less than an hour, in my humble opinion. Now, that doesn't mean, however, that your kids shouldn't be doing learning activities outside of that hour or 2 or 3. It's such a great opportunity for them to enliven their passion for whatever they're interested in. And that means looking for, maybe they can put together by hand a little newspaper, or they can, Katie, I'm still seeing you for some reason. I don't know how to unpin you, but maybe they can put together a little family newspaper and go around and interview people and have an article about, what is everyone's opinion about the best recipe for blah, blah, blah. Or they can start cooking, or they can, and again, these are offline activities. I love the work of Dr. Thomas Armstrong, who wrote a book, like 20 books. I don't know, it's crazy. We're going to be doing a podcast together, but we did a masterclass together last year that I loved because we're so simpatico. And he's loaded with ideas for alternative activities for kids to learn. So I think that the question can be framed in a larger context in terms of supplementing and using this time to not necessarily drop what you're doing and sit and do craft activities for 4 hours a day. Because if you're busy, you're busy. But send your kids forth to create something that's in sync with their passion. And I love Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence. Why am I seeing somebody's screen? Okay, we don't want to do that. Okay, thank you. I love Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence test. So if you want, you could do that as a family and identify which of the 9 types of intelligence he refers to in his work. There's the body kinesthetic intelligence, musical intelligence, visual spatial intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, verbal linguistic intelligence, which is the reader and the writer, logic mathematic intelligence, which is, mathematics. Those 2 in particular are the ones that school tends to focus on. But it's a great chance for your kids to become more empowered and rewrite what school means. I want to say one more thing about that, but first I also want to mention that if you're on the call today right now and you have a question, please ask it. Please raise your hand if you want to come on and chat with us, or you can submit the question in the chat. What tends to happen in these calls, we've been doing them for like 6 weeks now, is that at the very end, people start piling in the questions. So if you are struggling in any way, you have a question about something like Pam did, or you just want some advice, or you just want us to know what's going on in your life, this would be the best time to submit that. So wrapping up the question about schooling and education, take a few deep breaths. And there's one other thing. There's a great book that I read many, many years ago when I was becoming a teacher called The Quality School by William Glasser. I must have been a teacher early on and found this book. And one interesting thing you could do with your kids would be to have them grade their own work. To start to give them more autonomy and agency, how well do you think you did that essay? What would you give it? Without making them change it. If they say, oh, that was a D, say, okay, good to know. And what do you think you would have had to do to turn it into like an A, like 5-star shining? Just starting to empower them, especially if we're moving into a pass-fail, which many schools are, as Katie mentioned, so that they can, become more aware of where they cut corners. It's just a great chance to do that in a safe way. So Katie, here's a question. Do you want to read it from another Katie or Katya? It's in the chat.
You want me to read it?
Sure.
My 14-year-old daughter takes less than 20 minutes to finish all her schoolwork that comes from her teachers. I signed her up for some introduction to medicine classes that I thought she'd be interested in. She refused to come downstairs and cried in her room for 4 hours when it was time to join this online class.
Yeah.
She refuses to do learning activities beside her school. So how can I help her stay sharp during this time? Just want her to stay challenged and keep learning. So that is actually a really good question, because I'm working with a lot of kids in that 12 to 15 age group right now. And depending on their school and how they're handling this, there are kids who are finishing, in 20 minutes, an hour. They're bright enough to do it very, very quickly. I actually had a girl say to me last week, we really ought to have way more recess at school, because now I know that school doesn't take very long. And, she was kind of making a joke, but it's true for some kids. I have a nephew who I think is finished in about 30 minutes every day. So it's hard. I think that this is an opportunity, if we choose to see it that way, to help kids find what they're passionate about. And as parents, we tend to think that we know. So if you asked me what I thought my 13-year-old daughter would be wanting to do, I would be signing her up for all kinds of like fashion, school, online things, because she's always shown an interest in that. Turns out what she'd rather be doing is writing short stories. So, I learned that by, hey, is there anything else I can sign you up for? Is there something you're interested in, something you want to do? I know it gets boring being at home all the time. Tell me what's interesting to you, and I'll see what we can find. We can research it together. And she was like, I just want to have time to write. I never have time to write for fun. I'm always writing what's assigned to me. So she's kind of been doing a little bit of that. it's so hard because we go through this every summer where we worry about the summer slide and, you know, how much learning are they going to lose in the summer months? And then we kind of get back to school and realize, oh, they didn't learn that much. You know, everybody gets a refresher
Right.
in math because every brain needs that in September, but they don't actually lose as much as we think. And research actually backs that up. And what happens is they engage in different things like Susan was just talking about. So, you know, in the summer, they're outside a little bit more. So they're using different muscle groups and learning different things. You know, so I think right now the problem is now we have like a 6-month summer slide situation that we're staring down, and we're all having that worry of, is it enough? Is it too much? What's the balance? Are they actually learning on their own? How can we be sure that this is working? And the truth is we don't know. We can't be sure of anything right now. We can't even be sure what summer is going to look like. We can't even be sure what's going to happen in the fall. So the best we can do is really stay calm and meet these kids where they are. These middle schoolers are struggling emotionally. Social things are even harder now than they were. You know, it's hard enough trying to deal with the lunch table in person. Now you're dealing with the virtual lunch table where you can be in and out, you know, really quickly. So they have a lot going on. And I think it's not the best answer, but my best advice is to really empathize with your daughter and just say to her, like, I'm so proud of you for finishing your work every day. I think it's great that you get it done so quickly. I'm a little worried that you're going to get bored. Tell me something that you're interested in, or you go and research something you're interested in, come back to me and let's see if we can make that happen. Giving them some agency in figuring out what they're going to do with their time, and then just, you know, letting them cry. They need to cry, and 14-year-olds will fight it until they absolutely can't hold it in anymore. But they need it. They need to cry. They need to be upset. They need to own that this is just really, really hard and rotten and not what was supposed to happen.
Yeah. Katie, let's carry on with that for a minute, because this idea is such a cornerstone of my work as well. The idea of helping our kids discover that they can live through frustration and loss and disappointment. I'm just all over that. And I feel that we shelter our kids a lot. We try and fix their problems so that they don't have to bump up against the painful, hard wall of futility. So let's talk about what it might look like for a parent of a child whose work is finished really early. The parent is working and they can't be sort of engaging and kind of conjuring up really fun activities all day. And we know that the alternative for many, many families are the screens, which I've dramatically modified my views on. I think most of my colleagues have as well, the ones that were diehard, no, just don't overdo it. But there is still a point of diminishing returns, and there's a point at which a child who actually needs to feel sad is going to use the drug of the screen to not feel their feelings. And that does raise some concerns for me. So I'll turn that over to you, and then and we can sort of bounce that around a little bit, that screens, for all the great things that they're offering us in terms of freedom, respite, distraction, entertainment, education, there will come a point when your child is like this, glossy-eyed, and either because it's just too much, it's just simply too much for lots of traditional reasons, or because you're concerned that they're not feeling their sadness about the frustrations and fears and worries of this time, because they're constantly injecting the drug of distraction through the screen.
Well, I think one thing, we can't talk about that without talking about the fact that, you know, one of the big things with our kids right now, this generation of kids, is that they are so busy, you know, and I talk about living in this culture of busy all the time. They're doing a lot of things. And most of those things are adult-directed activities in one way or another. And they're used to a certain amount of just stuff going on. So not only did school end prematurely, but all their stuff, which would have been their healthy outlets for just pent-up emotion, gone. It's all gone, right? And it all just evaporated in an overnight, basically. So, you know, California kind of went first, and then all the other states followed, and it was just, all right, everybody's home. So they don't have those healthy coping outlets, and they don't really know necessarily how they want to fill their time. And they say that to me all the time. They'll say, well, I don't know what I want to do. And they get frustrated. I don't know. And part of that is we've never really given them the chance to know what they want to know. You know, they
Yeah.
really haven't had a lot of downtime or sort of blank space time to figure out what is it that you're passionate about. Patricia Worcester wrote a book called Ignite Your Spark for teenagers. And it's all about like, how do you figure out who you are and what you really want to do? Because we're always telling kids, this is the path you go on. If you want to do this, here's your path. If you want to do that, here's your other path. So we're kind of pointing them in the right direction, but we're never really letting them figure out what's meaningful to them. And so then the coping skill that they dive right into becomes the phone. And part of that is that right now, this is how they connect with their friends. And it was before the closures. It's just amplified right now because it's all there is. So they're doing FaceTime group chats, and they're doing Zooms, and they're doing, you know, all the social media, all the different apps. They're in and out. And it is mind numbing. I mean, honestly, and they'll tell me, I'm so sick of it. I'm taking an Instagram break. I'm taking a Snap break. You know, they'll put themselves on breaks without even necessarily telling their parents, because they never want adults to know that they're right. So they don't always admit it, but you know, so it's a complicated problem right now, because I hesitate to say, take it away, because it's a lifeline. It's a social lifeline, and they need some social interaction. The problem is, how do you monitor it? And that a lot of parents are struggling with that right now, and not knowing what boundaries to set. And I think, you know, as families, we all have to sit down and say, what are appropriate boundaries, and what do you need in terms of maintaining some social interaction versus being stuck in a screen all day long. I mean, when my kids, I mean, I keep joking about it, but I am working full time through this closure. So to have an 11-year-old and a 13-year-old who need me to monitor school, I mean, I taught them, like, you need to learn how to use Zoom by yourself so you can go from class to class, and you don't need a mom. I can need to check into the next thing. So, you know, they had to learn a lot of skills quickly because they go to a pretty low tech school. But the other part is, I will say to them, okay, I have clients, you know, do 1 o'clock until 5 tonight. So give me 3 things you're going to do after you're done with your work. What are your 3 options? Let me know. Because you can't interrupt me. So tell me what you're going to do. If you need, you know, help, you can bounce ideas off each other, you know, and they kind of have to come up with their own plans. So that's a skill kids are learning now, trial by fire. It's kind of a gift in a way.
I agree. And just to add on to that, thank you. To add on to that, if you do suspect that your teen or your youngster is so numbed out, or using their screens or the online activities to mask over deep fears, anxieties, and or depression, pay attention to that. It may not be convenient. It's like, no, this is terrible timing for you to get depressed or be anxious, but it's very realistic, and it's certainly not unexpected. So you may be working full time and unable to kind of get into the weeds in terms of how much screen time they're using. But in the evening, or on the weekends, look for opportunities to sit with that child, play a game. Don't come at them with, how are you doing? I have a feeling that you're not doing very well. Definitely don't use that. But spend time with them in a gentle, loving way, a friendly way, something ideally that they initiate. And then just check in. How are you doing, sweetheart? Because the goal isn't to get them off the screen and move them into a place where they start crying about whatever they're upset about. It's really to create an atmosphere that's safe, where if they're struggling with something, whether it's social issues or pressure or just worries about what the future holds, we want to be the one they turn to. And that may not happen during the day, but it can certainly happen in those off times. And that starts by creating the sense of safety and openness, where there's not, you know, the clock's not ticking here. You're not looking at your watch to say, I have 5 minutes, what's going on? But slow things down on the times when you can, and just say, hey, how are you? And even if you don't suspect that your child's struggling, just make sure that you give time for that emotional as well. So,
you know, one thing I do every night, sorry to interrupt, Susan, one thing I do every night with my own kids, and I do suggest it to parents, and listen, I'm exhausted by the end of the night too, so you're about to want to punch me through the screen, I know, but I lay down in each of their beds with them before they go to bed, and I say, give me your highlight reel and give me your low light reel, and I give them mine. And I keep saying to them, even through these closures and in regular life before and whatever new regular life is after, like, we're always going to have highs and lows during the day. So let's share our highs and lows. let's talk about 2 low light things and 2 highlight things. And, what was good, what went really well, what didn't go well, what do you miss? And just, I say to them every single night, I know this is hard. I really appreciate how hard you're working to get through this. I know this is hard. Tell me your highs and tell me your lows, and let's talk about them. And, some nights they don't have lows. Some nights they say, today was actually kind of okay. It went better than I thought, or whatever. And that's fine. They don't always have to have bad things to talk about. But when we kind of do both, a little bit of both, and we acknowledge that.
Great. So somebody says, a couple people, just one moment. Could you mute just for a second? Let me just wrap up a couple things before I forget. So the books I've mentioned, The Quality School by William Glasser, Thomas Armstrong's books, all of them I like, but The Myth of the ADD Child is one of the more recent. Howard Gardner's Multiple Intelligence. Katie mentioned Ignite Your Spark. So here's a comment from Edgar, thank you. Along the lines of helping them find their interests, I think it helps to ask our kids to do something together, not using a top-down approach. But what can you do together that isn't academically driven, like baking, cooking, playing a board game, working on a puzzle, gardening? That's great. Thank you for that comment. Did somebody want to ask a question? You can unmute yourself and ask.
Yes, thanks so much, Susan. I wanted to start to saying thank you so much for those Mondays and all the work that you do. It is really making a huge difference in our family dynamics, since being able to handle 3 kids, so 7, 5, and 4. And I will be quick, because a lot of things that you were advising me really have worked. I have noticed that especially now on weekends when my husband participates, the kids are really wild. They're much harder to control. There's more back talk. It's more chaotic, and by the end of it, I'm exhausted, he is exhausted, although there's 2 of us. So I just not sure what would be the best way to kind of get it into a better place. And yesterday and recently, my 7-year-old, who is very social, and I think he's missing that with schooling.
Yeah.
He handles all his Zoom meetings by himself. He enjoys school, and he does all the things himself. I am not really involved in his homeschooling as well, so I'm thrilled with that. But I think there is some social factor that he's missing his friends, and he's picking more fights with his 5-year-old brother. He is bossing him around more, and he's saying some mean things to him, and then he would turn around and smile, or will tell us, oh, I didn't say this, as his middle brother is saying what he just experienced from him. So it could be some really mean words like, oh, you're stupid, or I'll throw you off the roof, whatever it could be, or he will just hit him. So that is something that I will mute myself because they both just came.
Oh, sure. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Thanks for your question. Hi, Betty. So, do you want to start, Katie, or shall I?
You can start. Go ahead.
So I'm so not surprised that on the weekend there's a lot of action going on in your house. It just makes so much sense to me. I want to make sure I can still see you. Alexandra, can you just say something so I can watch your face? Because it holds.
Yes, I'm here. It's just
okay,
the voice came up.
No, that's fine. You can mute if you want. It holds the image of the last speaker. So I was seeing Katie, but talking to you.
Okay.
But if you would like to mute, it's totally fine. So makes perfect sense. And typically, if you can front load the day, so the early part of the day, if that could be a time when you take the boys, you and your husband, if you have a yard, I think you do, I think you've been on the calls, and you create some kind of pretty strenuous activity. Can you mute yourself, love? So
Yep.
If you could create some kind of obstacle course in the backyard, as physical as you possibly can. There could be a throwing game, any kind of roughhousing that you can do chasing them around, having anything that's large muscle, it just seems like it's coming out, and they may be especially excited, which might be obvious to you, that he's there. But the other piece of that would be during the week, it may be helpful if you could do a little bit of roughhousing with the kids. Is that a possibility during, maybe for 5 minutes, or do you?
Yeah, I do that.
Okay.
And that's the thing. I spend time with them and I try to hear what they want to do. So, for example, with a 7-year-old, we were throwing a ball in the basement. With my 5 and then a 7-year-old yesterday, went to the basement. I have my studio there. I paint, but also I keep a box with various materials, and then they were creating things out of the box, and that kind of helped them bond together and move along. And so, I mean, I'm very conscious of different things, and I'm trying to do that. Unfortunately, after some activities, I find more of that pushback. So, like on early last week, I was with my 7-year-old who's playing saxophone, and he wanted to write songs about baseball. His middle brother decided that he didn't want to participate, so he asked me, and of course I was happy to come in. So I was on the drums and I was supportive. He was really excited. We really had a good time. But afterwards, he seems to be lashing out even more at the 5-year-old, and then at me. He told me yesterday to shut up and never talk to him, when of course I just stopped talking to him. He is screaming, throwing things and saying, "Mama, talk to me." And he started crying, and I remembered what he keeps saying about crying. And he says, "No one likes me, no one wants to be with me." He's crying through, and then he came over after 10 or so minutes and apologized, and he said that he would be mindful what he's doing, gave me a hug.
Okay.
So I just
But those are supervised activities. Is there, and I'll turn it over to you now, Katie, but it may just be there's too much contained indoor, even supervised one-on-one activity or one-on-two.
I see
I'm
outside.
looking for, these are young boys, I'm looking, or young children, physical. Katie, what would you add to that?
Well, I was going to say, I mean, first of all, I empathize with you because I think you're in the weeds in terms of ages of kids and this stage of parenting. It's really hard, and I remember it. And it's just hard at those ages. They do have a lot of energy. They have a lot of opinions. They're used to a certain amount of structure, and even with homeschooling and different things. And it's all topsy-turvy and upside down right now. So I'm not surprised that they're having these moments where they struggle, and especially on weekends, because we kind of treat weekends like, okay, it's a free for all. This is the time for everyone to decompress, except they don't know how to do that. They're young, and everything's, not making sense to them. I guess my suggestion would be, can you put the 7-year-old in charge of making the obstacle course outside, or making, I've been watching kids all over my neighborhood with sidewalk chalk, making little things where on each sidewalk brick there's you have to do 10 jumping jacks, it'll say, on one, and then the next one is spin around 3 times, and then the next one is sprint 5 steps, and then so they're coming up with all these kind of neat things, and then it's sort of in the front and people walk by and they're supposed to do it and they do it with them, and it's everyone stays 6 feet apart, but they're kind of doing some physical activity, but maybe giving him that role of, what fun things can we do to get our energy out? I'm not a 7-year-old boy, but you are, so what's fun. Tell me what's fun and I'll help you do it, but you tell me what the good ideas are and we'll make it happen. I mean, sometimes they come up with absurd things, but sometimes they come up with really great ideas for that. Just sort of, as Susan's, what she's trying to say is like, they need to jump around, they need to get out, jump around, get all that energy out. I mean, every kid needs that, girl or boy. People always say, oh, boys need that, but my daughter needs that arguably more than my son. So, kids of all ages, they've got a lot of pent up energy, especially right now. So that would be my suggestion, is kind of get him in on it, give him a role where he's a leader and you're working together to help entertain the other kids, instead of it becoming a power struggle between the 3.
Yeah. And you might empower the 5-year-old so that, they may take shifts, because the 5-year-old may not want this, 7-year-old in that role. Maybe the 7-year-old assumes that role quite a lot to be in charge. So maybe they could have different jobs or different tasks or different parts of the yard where they design something or they're responsible for an activity. But again, I love the beginning of what you said, which is just, this is just a hard time. And I keep remembering that, and and the things that I'm reading and reminding myself that human beings get through difficult things. We're incredibly resourceful. It can help, as Katie does at night, to just say, this is hard. This is hard. To just say it out loud, acknowledge it, give credence to it, validate what they're experiencing. And then the two of you may fall into bed on the weekends. I mean, it just may be hard for you as well. It's just tiring. And there is light at the end of the tunnel. We don't exactly know where it is, but this isn't this isn't the rest of our lives. This is a period of time. I often remind people to look over their shoulder. So I don't know about you guys, but I think we've been sheltering in place for 5 or 6 weeks now. Now, when this started, we were all getting the news like, what do you mean 2 weeks? What? Okay, so remind yourselves and your children, look how well you've done. Like, look how far we've come. We didn't know we could do this 6 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. We didn't know we'd be able to move a lot of our activities online or stay in the house or honor these recommendations, but we're doing it. That's amazing. One other thing, just in my little town, it's so sweet, and it might be a fun activity for some of you to make signs. There are signs all over our little small town saying, we've got this, or what are 10 things you're grateful for, or thank you, first responders or healthcare workers. So it's a way to channel energy into something that's more positive. We all do better in difficult times when we can contribute. Selfishly, one of the reasons I've been doing these Monday Better Togethers and all the classes and programs and sing-alongs and everything I've been doing is because it makes me feel better. It's not just that. I do feel for all of you, but when children have the same need, they anything that they can do that helps them feel that they've pitched in a little bit can mitigate some of the difficulty. I don't see any other questions. Katie, would you like to add anything? And then we'll try a few minutes to break out.
When you were talking about, doing things to, to contribute, my little sister is a nurse in Boston, and she's actually working at the COVID unit of her hospital. She's a critical care nurse. And she has been telling me that starting last week, cards started pouring in from kids all over the United States, or, predominantly in the Massachusetts area, but from all over. And she was sobbing just happy tears of kids of all ages writing these little thank you notes. And I thought, and I have suggested that I do a story time every day at 1 o'clock on my Facebook page. And I have suggested that to my listeners and my little kids that check in with me every day. But I think that's a great thing. The signs are great, but sticking a card in the mail to the COVID unit at your nearest hospital with a picture and a thank you note. I mean, it just means so much to these people who are really holding themselves together, every single day. So that's
thank you. All right, there is a question.
Hi.
Hi, Debbie.
How are you? Thank you again for doing these two. I appreciate. I really enjoy logging in and listening to everyone share, and I learn a lot from the questions and the answers alike. I have a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old. My 4-year-old it was in a special ed preschool prior to this happening. He has a bit of a speech delay. He seems to also have, struggle controlling, like impulse control. We had some issues with hitting. We're getting in a better routine. That's improving. His occupational therapist sent home a storybook that she wanted us to start reading with him to get him prepared for possibly going back to school. And it's a story about getting kids used to seeing people in masks and when you go out in the stores. And I guess I was just trying to wrap my head around this. My son sometimes is bothered if I have sunglasses on or if my hair is a way he doesn't like. And to me, thinking about him going back to his school and maybe seeing teachers wearing masks or even himself having to wear one or kids having to wear one, it's all hypothetical right now because none of that is happening. They could be closed for the whole year. But I guess I'm just trying to figure out how to manage, my own anxiety, his anxiety about that. And if it's worth trying to kind of keep him shielded from it for as long as possible. So even if the school year does open up for the last month, but it's under those conditions. Like, would it be better for my 4-year-old who sort of struggles just to keep him home till the end of the year, keep him home throughout the summer, wait till the fall when maybe the restrictions aren't that tight? I don't know. Like I said, it's just sort of like it was a bizarre reality for me to have to, fathom for my son going back to school. And I just wondered what your thoughts were about it.
Katie,
Yeah,
do you
for
want to
sure.
start?
Yeah, and that's, that's a difficult age in terms of trying to help them. They're starting to understand the bigger world around them, but also some of those things feel really scary. It's like when kindergartners come home with these enormous thoughts and you're like, why are you thinking that? You're only 5, but they're really starting to explore, what does everything mean around me? But a lot of that information can be overwhelming. I am always a fan of normalizing it at home first. So if you have, if you have somebody crafty in your life who can make you a mask that is appealing, like, with whatever your son likes, if it's teddy bears or skateboards or whatever, that you can sometimes start putting on and off and just saying, something people are going to be doing right now is wearing masks. So we all stay healthy, and just leave it at that. And, I'm going to put mine on for a few minutes. Oh, I don't feel like I need it right now. If I go out, I'm going to need it. And then just kind of pop it on and off.
Right.
And then, kind of normalize it. And then, because he's home right now anyway, for the time being. So then eventually you can kind of build it up for him to, I don't know if you'll need to wear a mask, but if you ever did, is there something you would want on it? Something special that you would like on your mask? And kind of everyone in the family, like, go through it that way to just kind of make it, this is something we may have to do. We're not sure, but keep it very simple. People are wearing masks in public now to keep everybody healthy. So I'm going to try mine on for a little bit and practice wearing it, so I get used to it. Start with you, and then it can kind of trickle down. In terms of send them back or don't send them back, that's a hard one. If you have the emotional bandwidth and the infrastructure at home to distance learn, and I know that's hard when you have a child who has extra needs and is getting additional support through OT and speech and other things, is missing out on that going to be too great for him? Should school go back? Or are they Zooming? I mean, my other question is, all my speech therapist pals are Zooming and things? So
they are. Yeah, those are sort of the only lessons his preschool teacher does a couple things too, but yeah, he does each week have at least one Zoom for speech and OT.
So for me, if it were me, the mom, I think I would probably plan on keeping him home if they would continue those services from home, just because every disruption is magnified for kids who have extra needs. So, you're getting into a routine now at home, and if you can maintain it. Now, if it's impossible for you to maintain it for your own life, then that, you deal with the disruption and you prepare in advance for the return.
Oh, thank you. Okay, that's helpful.
Great. I think that's complete. I'm going to leave it at that. We do have a couple of other questions. This is what happens. My son is 18 and doesn't want to do any kind of exercise. How can I motivate him? Same here. My 17-year-old plays video games till past midnight and misses his online morning classes. I'm just going to let you do that again, Katie, and I'll take the next one, because you just wrote this great book on teens.
All the teenagers are not wanting to do their exercise. It's like nothing I've ever seen. Even the super athletic ones are, that are in, play team sports and stuff, are not wanting to do exercise. It's like you're asking them, I don't know, it's like torture. So I have really been spending a lot of therapy sessions talking about mental health and how exercise actually staves off anxiety and depression. And when we don't get any of it, we do get into a pattern where we feel we don't crave it, we don't need it. But when we get into a pattern of doing it, even just 20 minutes a day, our brain starts to crave it, and then it becomes our new normal. It takes, I think it's 66 days to make or break a habit officially. So we all have a lot of time on our hands. For the teenagers, am trying to encourage them to think outside the box and look for things that are fun. There's a ton of Zoom and YouTube exercise classes going on now, specifically geared for teens. And, some of the girls like better, some of the boys like better. They're really liking the Hit 30 kind of things, where they do 30 minutes of different exercises every 30 seconds. It's kind of like a boot camp, but online. So there's some of that. There's some kids that are like learning new sports, just doing classes online. So it really becomes about, I think what a lot of my parents of teens are finding right now is they're just having to set a boundary of, my expectation is 30 minutes of exercise a day. let's look into things together. Let's figure out how you can do that. You can run outside, you can walk outside, you can do an exercise video, you can do it on a PS3, you can do it on, you know, there are games that are exercise games that they can do. You can do it however you want to do it, but you have to do it to get the rest of the stuff.
Great.
And it's hard because I'm not normally a do this to do that, like reward person in general, because I think we need intrinsic rewards. You know, we need to be motivated intrinsically to do things, or we're going to stop when the rewards stop. But for right now, where they're in that rabbit hole of YouTube and video games, you know, just tie it to the YouTube and video games. So yeah, you can absolutely play all the video games you want. You just got to get your 30 minutes of exercise in. Let's go.
Yeah, great. And be clear. The more you're clear, the less negotiating, the less discussion and rambling. And yeah, this is just how it is. So some of this is you kind of tapping into that part of you as a parent that can be decisive, that can, I call it the captain of the ship, that can compassionately and lovingly say, this is how it is, as you said. For an 8-year-old, what is enough social interaction right now? Friends are calling and she's not interested. And it seems counterintuitive to push the FaceTime if it doesn't feel natural to her. I know she misses her friends. Is letter writing enough? Yes, I love letter writing. Is it enough? I mean, I can't say what's enough. But I have to say, I kind of commend your daughter in a way for saying, no, FaceTime is not the same. I FaceTime every day, sometimes for over an hour with my 98-year-old mother. We sent her an old iPad. We set it up. We had somebody at the assisted living help her. I have walked her around town. One night I spent almost 2 hours. We, you know, cooked dinner. I watched her eat dinner, and we're with her on this thing. And she always says, when am I going to see you? And I can be saying, Mom, you're seeing me right now. And I know it's not the same. So it's not the same. And if your daughter feels that FaceTime is not the same as socializing in person, bless her and say, you know what? Go with what feels right to you. I wouldn't be pushing it. Okay, see, this is what always happens, Katie. The questions start pouring in. I have 3 boys, 11, 10, and 7. In these weeks staying at home, the eldest's overall anger and dominant aggressive behavior towards his brothers is worse than ever. We don't seem to be able to connect with him to back down and admit that this needs to be handled differently and more respectfully. He doesn't admit any wrongdoing. Any suggestions?
Sorry, I'm not laughing at the problem. I'm just laughing because I feel like this is every question I get every day from every parent. This is so hard because they're not, you know, Susan was talking earlier about that need for physical play and physical exertion, and kids aren't getting it because we're not allowed to give it to them in the same way that we used to be allowed to give it to them. Even, you know, if you're lucky enough to have a yard, then I guess you're lucky enough. But a lot of people aren't, you know, a lot of people live in apartment buildings and shared spaces. And so then you're trying to, you know, manage sharing that space with other families and the distancing and all that stuff. So it's not as easy as just go outside.
No.
You know, so the oldest, I'm sorry, I'm just rereading, is 11, and he's the one with the anger. Okay. 11's a really hard age for this right now. So, and I'm going to actually kind of go back to the previous question to answer this question, because while some kids are, it really is hard to communicate over Zoom and FaceTime, and it's emotionally draining, and it's hard to read social cues, and it's sometimes the connection isn't strong, and so that makes it even harder. So we're really like hyper focusing our brains to try to communicate this way. I'm even watching some of you do it on the screen, and it's hard. It's exhausting. It's physically and emotionally exhausting. However, 11-year-olds are kind of needing some interaction. When they don't get any, they feel disconnected. And so one thing I'm having a lot of boys that age do is find, you know, one good friend that they can do something on Zoom with, like play a game of chess, or go outside and have a virtual horse tournament with basketball, you know, shoot some hoops in their yard if they have a hoop in their yard, or some other thing that they would do in their yard that they can kind of connect and do it together. And it's a little funny because of course it's not perfect, you know, you're not shooting exactly from the same place, but it is giving them some of that social interaction that they might be craving. You know, 11-year-olds just don't have the anger management skills that we expect them to have as parents. The expectation gap tends to be a little bit big in that department. If we went under the hood of 11-year-olds, their brains are like a hot mess of rewiring right now. So there's, there's just a lot of growth and a lot of change and a lot of hormones that you're not seeing physically yet, but that are definitely happening underneath the hood. So some of that comes out as that anger. I am a huge fan of teaching all kids deep breathing. It's the single best thing you can do to get through anger, panic, worry, just even overexcitement when someone can't calm down because they're just like so excited and happy they can't calm down. It's just the best thing we can do to calm our central nervous system. This is a tough age in terms of finding a way to do that it's meaningful. There are a lot of great apps. I know I'm saying don't be online all day, but be online for good things. So like the Stop, Think, Breathe Kids app is phenomenal for kids. It does an emotions check-in. So you can check in angry. They'll give you 3 options. It's free. They'll give you 3 options for, breathing exercises to do. He can do it himself with earbuds in or in his room, whatever. And then you do an emotional check-in again at the end to say, how did that go? If he checks that he liked it and he feels a little calmer, they'll suggest that one again the next time he's angry. I always say the key to learning deep breathing is to learn it when you're calm. You can't learn it when you're angry. It's too late. So, practicing it in the morning. It's called Stop, Breathe, Think Kids. There's also an adult version. The kids version has a little cloud. And it's a great app. So I would start building up the coping skills. So that's one way to do it. Stress balls are just a great way to breathe and get the physical tension out of your muscles out at the same time. And then, sometimes even with boys, one thing I'll have them do is write down every single thing they're mad about on individual slips of paper and then either tear them up, because that gets the physical exertion out, or crumple them and, trash can, basketball, throw away all that mad stuff.
Awesome. Great. Okay, everybody, we're going to come into the wrapping up. Thank you so much, Katie. Tell people about your website, where they can find you, and I'll share a couple of other announcements with everybody. So hang on before you leave if you can.
My website is practicalkatie.com. I spend a lot of time on Facebook, Katie Hurley, LCSW, on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter and everywhere else. But I would say I put most of my energy into Facebook.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for such great practical.
Thank you for having me.
Practical.
Katie. That's it.
So my website's susanstiffelman.com, and we've got this going on every Monday, so you're welcome to join. There's also a free podcast. Last week was on handling overwhelm with Janet Lansbury. I've done that was prioritizing. We've got overwhelm. This week will be Rachel Macy Stafford, and so her book is out, by the way, guys, tomorrow. So if you go to her website, there's a book order page. Amy, can you drop that in? She's got some wonderful pre-orders. And then starting on the 8th, I'm doing a 3-part class with Dr. Laura Markham on sibling solutions. So please tell your friends if you'd like. We're pricing it low as we are everything. And this is a chance to get really down into the weeds with some of the stuff that you go through with your siblings, with your, when you have more than one child. So lots of good content there. So it's handsfreemama.com/live-love-now. That's Rachel's book. We're going to move into breakout rooms. Some of you might not want to, so no problem, but it's just an option. And Katie, can you stay on for another 5 or 10 minutes, or do you have to go?
I can do 5 minutes.
All right. Well, let's just see what happens. I'll drop everybody in. If you don't want to join, then we'll just bid you a good week and hopefully see you next week.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And let your parent community know, if you would, that this is available as a resource to your school, to your church, to your temple, whatever parent community you're part of who might have people who are kind of flying under the radar and actually needing support, but not reaching out. Maybe they're a little reluctant to say, yes, I'm not doing very well, but something like this is a safe way to join with other parents every week and to feel like what you're going through is, you're not crazy. It's really hard. And so we've been finding a lot of parents are benefiting, and you guys can help us magnify the reach if you would. So next week is Dr. Mona Delahook. That'll be another great session.
She's a gem.
She's fantastic. Katie, thank you. And let's move into these groups. You guys are welcome. And here we go. It's a very interesting system. Oh, I see what we do. All right, we're just going to go into 2 groups. Okay, here we go. All the best, everybody. So I'm going to join.
I think everybody left. I clicked something wrong, so just you and me now.
Yeah, it said go back to the main session.
Oh,
Here they
okay.
are.
Everybody's back. Okay. Oh.
Hi. This is
Susan,
really
you're
cool. I
muted.
didn't know that you could do this in Zoom.
I'm
Super
glad
cool.
that you all were with us today. We may go back to the webinar format next week. It's a little distracting to have all the faces, but Amy and I will talk about that. Does anyone have a vote? Would you prefer the way we did it today or the less distracted version? How about, this is the meeting format. Raise your hand if you prefer this.
I
Webinar.
like it. Am I the only one who likes it?
Yeah, it was really nice. Zoom is good.
This is the format that lets you go into the breakout rooms. That's why we moved over from webinar format. So there's something great about that. The downside is that when I'm co-teaching, I like it when both faces can be visible at the same time so that we can kind of bounce off each other. So any thoughts, opinions? Anybody? Oh, everyone's muted. Let me see if I can unmute it. Anne says she liked it. Let me find a way to unmute all of you.
Well,
I
as
liked
someone
it.
who does this a lot as a co-presenter, I actually kind of like being able to see the parents in the room
Nice.
and just see their reactions. Because for me,
Okay.
it's like I feel like a talking head half the time
Yeah,
when I'm
yeah.
doing these things. So
Great. Okay. And by the way, Katie, will you email me what you're doing for lighting?
oh yeah, totally. My
Your
husband
setup.
is yeah, he's got me all fixed up.
Oh my gosh. I've tried all kinds of devices and I always look like I'm washed out. So,
I will send it to you. Yep.
so everyone, big virtual hug.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks
I was
guys.
telling
You
our
all.
little group that over the weekend I was pulling digital footage, you know, trying to get some of the footage on, and I watched a video of me birthing my 9.5-pound son over 27 hours, and I hadn't slept for 2 nights by the time I got him out, and I was passing out in between contractions and like hallucinating. And at the end, because I was so exhausted, I hadn't eaten, I hadn't slept for those,
God.
you know, more than 27 hours because I had, you know, went into labor at 1 in the morning or something. And at the end, like he almost comes out and then he goes back like 10 times. And they're pushing on my stomach because I have nothing left. And you know, but then they say, come on, this is the one, and you know, push. And I just did. And I was sobbing watching this video. And I just reminded me of that we have done really hard things. All of us have a story like that.
Yeah.
All of us have pushed way beyond what we thought we could do. And I think it's just one of those times to remember that we will get through it. We'll be strong. We'll be stronger. So best to everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks again,
Thanks, Susan.
Katie.
Nice to
Thank
meet you guys.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.